To wage a war, you must have two letters S, silah, a weapon, and sardiya, a narrative. And the second letter S is much more important than the first letter S, the narrative. The narrative is more important than the weapon. But what does narrative mean, Jamal? A narrative is the first thing that comes to mind when you hear a word. You hear America, your mind responds automatically, and Hollywood, Congress, Apple, power, progress, injustice, capitalism, and so on appear before you. And if you hear Russia, the mind responds. And the KGB, the bear, the Kalashnikov, Tolstoy's beard appear before you. And so on. Every word you hear, you have an initial impression of it stored in your mind. This impression is called a narrative. But why is it called a narrative? Because it works through repetition and narration. Thus, the chain works like this. Narration creates the impression creates the opinion controls the action, and the action turns into a decision. So, the foundation is narration, the foundation is a narrative. Salim Al-Jahuri, an Omani Gulf media personality, appears in a clip and says that there are leaks that Donald Trump asked the Gulf states for $5 trillion to continue the war. The Gulf political analyst, also Omani, Ali Al-Mashni, picks it up and repeats the information. Then come social media herds that pick up and repeat amidst this chaos. It's planted that the 5 trillion story is a leak from the Washington Post. Good? Good. You go look in the Washington Post, you find nothing. But you discover that you were the only person who went to look, while the ideologized herds took it as fact. And that was that. And the narrative is being planted that Trump is blackmailing the Gulf states. That's one idea. But the real narrative is that the Gulf is submissive to blackmail, that the Gulf is weak, dilapidated, and incapable of resisting. This narrative is constantly reinforced, and new material is being pumped into it all the time. The Kuwaiti Gulfite, Dr. Abdullah Nafisi, comes out and says the Gulf states are just gas stations. Then Ali Al-Mashni pops up and says, No, you're wrong, doctor. The Gulf states are just supermarkets. Then Abdullah Al-Musfir comes along and says the Gulf states are entities made of glass, in a strange alignment with the very same description used by Hassan Nasrallah. The Gulf states succeed in protecting their airspace by 95%, yet they claim these countries are defenseless. Iran fails to protect a single meter of its airspace, and the same gang says Iran is a sovereign state. If there's anything Iran has sovereignty over, it's your weak and defenseless minds. Should I take the word of Salim Al-Jahuri or the word of Elon Musk? Should I take the word of Ali Al-Mashni or the word of Jensen Huang? Should I take the word of Dr. Abdullah Nafisi or the word of Robert Capito? Should I take the word of Al-Musfir or the word of Masayoshi Son? Should I take reality, history, and what's happening right before the eyes of the whole world? Or settle for the nonsense of Fatma Samadi, Abdul Qadir Faiz, and the rest of those drugged up Iran lovers? There's a story about a man suffering from a mental illness, and let's call this man Nafsan bin Ma'shan al-Masfarawi. Nafsan believed he was a grain of seed and not a human being. Poor guy. And whenever he saw a chicken in the street, he'd run far away from it, fearing it would eat him. He entered a psychiatric hospital for treatment, and after long sessions, the man was convinced he was a human and not a seed. Thank God. So the therapist gave him a discharge to leave the hospital and return to his family. But after he stood at the hospital door, he saw a chicken in the street across the way. He returned to the hospital, struck with panic. The therapist asked him, "Aren't you convinced that you're a human being?" He said, "Yes, but who's going to convince the chicken?" In the Gulf, there are those who are just like this man, Nafsan ibn Ma'shan al-Musfarawi. No, they're even worse than him. Why? Because they aren't content with just considering themselves seeds. They try to convince all Gulf people that they're just seeds for chickens to eat. The Gulfite Nafsan ibn Ma'shan considers the people of the Gulf to be either soft sweets to be eaten, gas stations to be used, or fragile entities in houses made of glass. And the problem is that this Gulfite Nafsan bin Ma'shan might appear on screens as an analyst or a thinker. He always reminds the Gulf people that they aren't sovereign human beings whose countries are linked to the world through strong and influential economic, commercial, and political relations. No. He comes out to remind people that they are just grains to be eaten by the Iranian chicken or the Israeli chicken. It won't do any good to take them to mental institutions to provide them with the necessary treatment. On the other hand, there's the Gulf human being, not the grain, nor the faluda, nor the gas station. The Gulf person who builds, protects, influences, provides relief, and mobilizes the world for the causes they support. A Gulf person whose skin is thick and impenetrable, whose flesh is bitter and inedible, and who knows exactly how to handle the Faluda. In the end, here is the Gulf, which has gone through pivotal historical milestones for decades. Regimes have fallen, countries have been torn apart, economies have deteriorated, and the skies of other nations have been violated. Yet, throughout this history, as Gulf people, we were never just gas stations, Faluda shops, or fragile entities. On the contrary, we have always been the stronghold, the safe haven, and the constant support. And all of this is by the grace of God above all else. And we say, as the poet said, enemies do not achieve from an ignorant person what an ignorant person achieves against himself. Enemies will not get to us, but they will certainly reach an ignorant few with their narratives. We are here to confront them, we are here to expose them, we are here to reveal them.